An officer and her 3 dogs were freezing to death in a sabotaged cabin 12 miles from civilization. Communications severed. Surrounded by the worst blizzard Montana had seen in 40 years. The men who left her there believed the storm would erase all evidence, that her body would be found weeks later, a tragic accident in unforgiving wilderness. But they made one fatal miscalculation. 4.7 miles away, a retired Navy SEAL and his combat-trained German Shepherd were about to hear something that would drag them both back into the fight they thought they'd left behind. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if you want to support the channel, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. The Cabinet Mountains rose like ancient sentinels against a sky the color of old bruises, their peaks disappearing into clouds that promised violence. Whitefish Ridge, Montana, population 847, clung to existence at 6,200 feet elevation, a collection of weathered buildings and stubborn souls who'd chosen beauty over comfort, isolation over convenience. The town survived on logging, tourism, and the kind of rugged independence that viewed asking for help as personal failure. In January, when temperatures plummeted to 25 below and wind screamed through the passes like something alive and angry, that independence could turn deadly. 9 miles outside town, connected by a Forest Service road that disappeared under snow for 5 months each year, stood a cabin that hadn't seen permanent occupancy in 3 years. The structure was simple, functional, built by someone who understood that mountains demanded respect, not decoration. Rough-hewn logs chinked against winter, a stone chimney that drew smoke efficiently, windows positioned for sightlines rather than views. Inside, the space reflected its current occupant with almost painful clarity. A single chair faced the fireplace. Military surplus sleeping bag on a frame bed. Tactical pack hanging by the door. Contents inventoried and ready. No photographs. No personal items. Nothing that suggested permanence or connection to anything beyond survival. Logan Reeves moved through this space like smoke. 34 years old, but carrying decades in eyes that never stopped cataloging exits, angles, threats. 6'2", 215 pounds of functional muscle built for endurance, not display. He possessed the kind of physical presence that made people step aside without consciously knowing why. Dark brown hair maintained at military length despite 8 months of civilian life. A scar traced his left jawline, souvenir from an IED in Syria that had killed 2 men he'd called brothers and left him with traumatic brain injury that ended his career with SEAL Team 3. He moved with economy as motion, each gesture deliberate, wasting nothing. Even pouring coffee became an exercise in efficiency. At his feet, tracking his every movement with amber eyes that missed nothing, Kodiak maintained the same watchful vigilance. 95 pounds of black and tan German Shepherd, 6 years old, bearing his own scar tissue from 4 years of combat deployment. The white mark on his right shoulder, shrapnel from the same blast that nearly killed Logan, served as permanent reminder of what they'd survived together. Kodiak wasn't a pet. He was a partner, a weapon, a brother, forged in circumstances where trust meant survival and hesitation meant death. They communicated in glances, subtle shifts of posture, a language developed in places where spoken words could get you killed. Logan had come to Whitefish Ridge for the same reason men like him always sought mountains and isolation. To forget, to decompress, to exist in a space where hypervigilance was appropriate rather than pathological, where silence was natural rather than symptom. The cabin asked nothing. The mountains judged nothing. Kodiak understood everything. It should have been enough. The morning of January 16th dawned without sun, light filtering through cloud cover that pressed down like physical weight. Logan stood on his porch, breath crystallizing instantly in air that burned exposed skin within minutes. The thermometer read -22. Radio weather reports, when static permitted reception, spoke of a storm system moving in that had meteorologists using words like historic and catastrophic. Blizzard warnings extended through the next 48 hours. Wind speeds predicted at 40+ miles per hour. Whiteout conditions. Avalanche danger elevated to extreme. He'd survived worse. Afghanistan's mountains in winter. Arctic training in Norway. the human body could endure remarkable punishment when properly prepared and motivated. Logan had supplies for 3 weeks minimum. Firewood stacked under tarps, water source that wouldn't freeze. Kodiak's presence providing both companionship and security. They'd wait out the storm like they'd waited out everything else, together, asking nothing from a world that had already taken too much. Kodiak's behavior changed first. Around 1400 hours, as the first real snowflakes began falling, fat and heavy with ominous intent, the dog's ears swiveled toward the northwest. His body went rigid in that specific way Logan had learned to read as threat detection. A low sound emerged from Kodiak's chest, not quite growl, more like question. Logan's hand dropped automatically to the sidearm he wore even in isolation, scanning terrain that was already disappearing behind curtains of white. Nothing visible, no movement, no sound beyond wind beginning its climb toward fury. What is it? Logan's voice came quiet, controlled, the tone that signaled he was taking the alert seriously. Kodiak held position, every line of his body screaming awareness of something Logan's human senses couldn't detect. The dog had been right before. In Kandahar, when he detected the secondary device everyone else missed. In that village outside Aleppo, where he'd identified the hostile concealed in civilian population seconds before weapons appeared. Kodiak didn't false alert. When he said danger existed, danger existed. Logan stood in the cold, letting snow accumulate on his shoulders, watching his dog watch something he couldn't see. The afternoon bled into evening. Temperature dropped another 6 degrees. Visibility collapsed to less than 20 feet. The wind found its voice, howling through timber with sound like distant screaming. Kodiak refused to stand down. As darkness fell and the storm intensified into genuine blizzard conditions, the dog moved between door and window, between Logan in the northwest, a pattern of agitation Logan had never seen in 6 years of partnership. Around 2200 hours, as Logan prepared to secure the cabin for night, Kodiak did something that changed everything. The dog approached the window facing northwest, made eye contact with Logan, then deliberately, purposefully, drove his head through the glass. The sound of shattering competed with wind. Cold air exploded inward. Kodiak stood in the broken frame, bleeding from a small cut above his eye, and barked once. The sound carried meaning Logan understood in his bones. Someone needed help. Out there in the storm. Someone Kodiak could sense but Logan couldn't see. And his partner, his brother, was telling him that sitting safe while others suffered wasn't acceptable. Logan grabbed his pack. 12 miles north of Logan's cabin, in a service station maintained by Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, Officer Sarah Chen had spent the last 4 months documenting crimes she knew would get her killed if the wrong people discovered what she'd found. At 38 years old, 14 years into a career protecting wildlife and wilderness, she'd developed the kind of principled stubbornness that viewed corruption not as inevitable reality, but as personal insult. Her field journal, leather-bound and meticulous, contained dates, GPS coordinates, photographic evidence, and testimonies that painted a portrait of systematic environmental destruction orchestrated by the most powerful man in the region. Sarah stood 5'6", compact and efficient, Chinese-American features inherited from a mother who'd immigrated in the 70s and married a logger who understood that forests were living things deserving respect. Her father had died in an accident 3 years ago that the official report called equipment failure, but that Sarah, with her investigator's instincts, suspected was something darker. Her husband, killed in what was ruled a logging mishap 2 months after her father, left her widowed at 35 with nothing but questions no one wanted to answer, and a determination that metastasized into obsession. She wore her black hair in a practical braid that fell between shoulder blades, kept her body conditioned through necessity rather than vanity. The work demanded physical capability. Hiking miles through brutal terrain, carrying equipment, occasionally defending herself against wildlife or, more dangerous, the humans who viewed environmental protection as obstacle to profit. She wasn't combat trained, had never fired her weapon at another person, but she possessed something more valuable in her line of work. She was relentless. Her 3 dogs reflected both her personality and professional requirements. Maverick, a 4-year-old male Malinois weighing 68 pounds, specialized in tracking with a nose that could follow scent trails days old through conditions that defeated human technology. Denali, A 5-year-old female Norwegian elk hound at 52 pounds had been bred for Arctic conditions, could work in cold that incapacitated other breeds. Scout, the youngest at 3, was a border collie mix weighing 47 pounds. Still in training for search and rescue, but showing remarkable aptitude. They weren't pets, they were partners, tools, and on nights like this, the only company that didn't ask questions she couldn't answer. The discovery that sealed her fate happened on January 9th, 7 days before the storm. She'd been investigating reports of a poisoned wolf pack in the protected territory bordering Caldwell Extractive Industries' exploratory mining claims. What she found turned her stomach and crystallized her resolve. 14 wolves dead, including 2 breeding females and 5 juveniles. The method was sophisticated, professionally executed. Compound 1080, sodium fluoroacetate, banned for predator control since the 70s, but still available to those with connections and absence of conscience. She documented everything. Bodycam footage uploaded to cloud storage before returning to areas with cell service. Tissue samples collected using proper chain of custody protocols. GPS coordinates marked with precision. But it was what she found beyond the kill site that transformed documentation into death warrant. Following drainage patterns uphill, she discovered the source. Caldwell's operation wasn't just exploratory. They'd already begun extractive processes, and the runoff contained toxins that would render the watershed poisonous for decades. Heavy metals, processing chemicals. Concentrated enough that Environmental Protection Agency intervention would be mandatory, immediate, and devastating to Caldwell's timeline. She filed her report on January 14th, routing it through federal channels to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service rather than local authorities she'd learned to distrust. The moment that report hit federal servers, Richard Caldwell's carefully constructed operation faced existential threat. EPA investigation would trigger injunctions. Mining permits would be revoked. Civil and criminal charges would follow. 40 years of Caldwell family dominance over regional economy and politics would collapse. Sarah knew this. She filed anyway. 24 hours later, Marcus Voss appeared at her door. He arrived in a black Suburban with 2 men Sarah didn't recognize. Hard cases with the bearing of people for whom violence was profession, not last resort. Voss himself was 42, 6'1", 205 pounds of muscle maintained through chemical assistance and gym obsession. Shaved head. Tattoos creeping up his neck that suggested white supremacist affiliations. He'd been Army MP before dishonorable discharge for excessive force, beating a detained Iraqi so severely the man lost vision in one eye. Now he was Caldwell's head of security, which meant he was the hand that did what wealthy men ordered but never acknowledged. Officer Chen. His smile contained no warmth. Mr. Caldwell wants you to know he's concerned about your safety. Big storm coming. You're pretty isolated out here. Sarah stood in her doorway, flanked by Maverick and Denali, who sensed threat and responded with low growls. I appreciate the concern. I'm well prepared. Thing is, we heard you filed some kind of report. Federal government, EPA. Voss stepped closer. Violation of personal space designed to intimidate. That's gonna cause problems. Lot of people depend on Caldwell Industries for their livelihood. Whole town, really. Be a shame if some misunderstanding shut down operations, put families out of work. Those families will have bigger problems if their water supply is poisoned. Sarah kept her voice level, hand resting on the doorframe inches from where her service weapon hung. The report documents violations of federal law. That's my job. Voss's expression shifted, friendliness evaporating to reveal the predator beneath. You might want to reconsider that position. Accidents happen in these mountains, especially in winter. Especially to people who are alone. I'm not alone. Sarah gestured to her dogs. And I'm not changing my report. The men left, but Sarah wasn't naive. She activated her body cam, recorded a summary of the encounter, uploaded it alongside her previous evidence. She checked her weapons, confirmed her satellite phone was charged, prepared as much as training and instinct allowed. But she'd made a fundamental error. She believed that documentation and federal involvement would protect her. That even Caldwell wouldn't be bold enough to act against a law enforcement officer with evidence already in federal hands. She underestimated how much money and power could corrupt, and she didn't understand that storms could be weapons as effective as bullets when wielded by those without conscience. The attack came on January 16th at 1100 hours. Sarah was conducting routine patrol. dogs loaded in her department truck. When she heard the distinctive sound of rotor blades, a helicopter, flying low despite weather warnings, moving along the ridgeline above her position. She thought nothing of it initially. Rich people did stupid things in machines they believed could conquer nature. Then the mountainside moved. Avalanche, massive and deliberate, triggered by explosives she recognized from the sound. Snow and rock thundered down, blocking the only road connecting her cabin to civilization. Her radio crackled with static as communication infrastructure, never reliable, succumbed to the storm that was intensifying ahead of predictions. She made it back to her cabin and found them waiting. Logan moved through the blizzard with Kodiak at his side, every step a negotiation with an environment actively trying to kill them. Visibility dropped to less than 10 feet. Wind drove snow horizontally with force that stung exposed skin like needles. Temperature had fallen to -25, wind chill pushing it to -60. At these extremes, flesh froze in minutes. Hypothermia became inevitable without proper gear and movement. The storm wasn't weather anymore. It was an entity, hostile and consuming, that reduced the world to white chaos and the sound of wind that mimicked human screaming. He'd prepared as thoroughly as 4 minutes allowed. Arctic parka rated to -40, insulated pants, boots designed for mountaineering, goggles that frosted over within seconds, but provided marginally better vision than naked eyes, gloves that allowed trigger finger mobility while preventing frostbite. His pack carried survival essentials, medical supplies, emergency shelter, rope, climbing gear, flares. The pistol at his hip and rifle slung across his back weren't for the storm, but for whatever waited beyond it. Kodiak wore a thermal vest, paws treated with protective wax, but the Dawn's Arctic breeding gave him advantages Logan's tropical adapted biology lacked. Navigation became exercise in faith and skill. GPS worked intermittently, satellite signal disrupted by the storm. Compass provided bearing, but terrain forced constant deviation around obstacles invisible, until nearly colliding with them. Logan relied on land navigation skills drilled into him through selection and honed through operations where wrong turn meant death. He counted steps, measured angles, adjusted for slope and wind drift. Kodiak led when visibility permitted. Nose and instinct, finding paths Logan's eyes missed. They'd been moving northwest for 40 minutes when Kodiak stopped so abruptly Logan nearly fell over him. The dog's body language shifted to high alert, head low, ears forward despite wind trying to flatten them. A sound cut through the storm's roar, faint and desperate. Barking. Multiple dogs. The cadence speaking distress, not aggression. Logan dropped to crouch beside Kodiak, hand on the dog's shoulder, feeling tension like coiled steel. Good boy, show me. Kodiak moved forward with renewed purpose, picking his way through drifts that reached his chest. The barking grew louder, more frantic. Then another sound joined it. Weaker, but distinctly human. A voice calling for help, barely audible, already hoarse from screaming into wind that swallowed sound. The cabin appeared like a ghost materializing from white void. Small structure, official-looking, with fish and wildlife service markings barely visible under accumulating snow. A department truck sat nearby, already buried to the door handles. No lights, no smoke from chimney. The windows were dark, except for one flickering orange glow that Logan's trained eye recognized immediately. Fire, small and struggling, visible through cracked glass. He approached tactically, despite urgency, weapon drawn, clearing angles. Kodiak flanked right, moving to secondary entrance. Training overrode emotion even now. The barking came from inside, 3 distinct voices, dogs in acute distress. The human voice had gone silent. The door was blocked from outside, not by snow, but by a heavy chain wrapped through the handle and padlocked to an anchor bolt someone had installed in the frame. Deliberate imprisonment. This was an accident. This was attempted murder dressed as natural disaster. Logan examined the lock for 3 seconds, determined it would take tools he didn't have, and made the tactical decision. He stepped back and kicked the door beside the handle with force that transferred 12 years of combat experience into a single strike. Wood splintered. The frame gave. Second kick, and the door exploded inward. Chain still attached, but frame demolished. Heat fled outward, what little remained escaping into cold that devoured it instantly. Logan moved inside, rifle up, clearing corners with speed that came from muscle memory. Small living space, kitchenette, sleeping area, office space with desk and filing cabinets. And in the center of the room, 3 dogs surrounding a woman lying motionless on the floor. The dogs reacted to intrusion with protective aggression, positioning themselves between their handler and the stranger. A Malinois, an Elkhound, and a Border Collie mix, all showing signs of severe cold exposure. Frost on their muzzles, shivering that spoke of core temperature drop, but still defending their person with loyalty that transcended survival instinct. Easy. Logan kept his voice calm, low, hands visible. Kodiak entered behind him, presence commanding immediate attention. The other dogs recognized dominance and professional bearing. Not a threat, an alpha. Their posturing changed from aggressive to uncertain. Logan holstered his weapon and approached slowly, speaking continuously in that tone that conveyed authority and safety. "I'm here to help. Let me see her." The woman was barely conscious, lips blue, skin pale with the waxy appearance that meant hypothermia was advanced. She wore thermal clothing, but it wasn't enough, not after hours in temperatures that had dropped as heating failed. Her breathing was shallow, irregular, pulse weak and slow. Logan's combat medical training cataloged signs automatically. Core temperature probably between 85 and 90 degrees, moderate to severe hypothermia. Without intervention, she'd be dead within 2 hours. He keyed his radio, knowing it was futile but following protocol. Static. The storm had killed all communication. They were alone. "Can you hear me?" Logan checked her pupils. Response time. "I'm Logan, Navy medic. You're going to be okay." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Dogs. Save the dogs. Not please help me. Not I'm dying. Save the dogs." Logan understood her in that moment with clarity that bypassed conscious thought. She was like him, service before self, others before comfort. The kind of person who'd die protecting what she'd sworn to defend. "They're coming with us, all of you." He looked at Kodiak. "Guard." Kodiak positioned himself at the door, sentinel and early warning system. Logan worked with efficiency born from treating casualties under fire. He stripped away wet outer layers, wrapped Sarah in emergency thermal blanket from his pack, activated chemical heat packs and positioned them at her core, neck, armpits. Her dogs pressed close, offering their body heat, understanding on instinctive level that pack survived together. As he worked, Logan's eyes tracked details his training demanded he notice. The disabled heating system, professionally sabotaged with cut fuel line. The blocked door with its external lock. Boot prints in snow outside. Multiple men. Recent enough the storm hadn't completely obscured them. Radio snashed deliberately. Satellite phone missing from its charging station. This wasn't robbery. This was execution, careful and calculated. Sarah's voice emerged in fragments between shivers. "Caldwell, evidence. They're going to destroy it." Evidence of what? Murder, environmental crimes, all documented. Her hand moved weakly toward a locked safe built into the wall. "Can't let them erase it." Logan found the documentation while monitoring her vital signs. Field journal detailed months of investigation. Photographs of poisoned wildlife. Soil samples logged with chain of custody. Financial records showing payoffs to local authorities. Names, dates, transactions. This woman had built a federal case against someone powerful enough to order her death and arrogant enough to believe Winter would hide the crime. He loaded the journal and sample bags into his pack, retrieved a hard drive from the safe that Sarah indicated with trembling finger. Whatever was on these materials, it was worth killing for, which meant it was worth protecting. "We need to move. My cabin is 4.7 miles southeast. Can you walk?" "Don't think so." Sarah's words slurred slightly, hypothermia affecting cognition. "Leave me. Take the dogs and evidence. Not how this works." Logan assessed the 4 dogs, their condition, the journey ahead. Maverick favored his right front paw, injury visible now that Logan looked closer. Caught in something, maybe a trap. Denali and Scout were in better shape but exhausted. Kodiak was operational, but even he was feeling the cold. "Here's what's happening." Logan spoke with command authority that brooked no argument. "I'm carrying you. The dogs follow. We survive the next 90 minutes, and we figure out the rest. Understood?" Sarah tried to nod, managed only a slight movement. They'll come, when the storm breaks, to confirm. Let them come. Logan lifted her with practiced efficiency. Fireman's carry that distributed weight properly. She was light, maybe 140, but 4 miles in a blizzard carrying a person was a different calculation than 4 miles alone. He looked at the 4 dogs. With me. Kodiak led them into the storm, and behind them, the cabin's darkness swallowed any trace of their departure. The journey back became a test of will against physics and biology. Human limitation confronting an environment that existed beyond concepts of mercy or fairness. Logan moved through the blizzard, carrying Sarah's 140 pounds, while his own body burned through calories at catastrophic rates, muscles screaming protests. He ignored through discipline that had been forged in places where weakness meant death for everyone depending on you. The dogs struggled through snow that reached their chests, Maverick limping badly now. Scout beginning to lag, even Denali's cold weather advantages insufficient against conditions that would have killed lesser animals within the first mile. Kodiak broke trail, his larger mass and combat experience making him natural leader for the desperate convoy. The dog seemed to understand the stakes with intelligence that transcended training, choosing paths that balanced speed against energy conservation, finding lee sides of terrain features that provided seconds of relief from wind that cut through gear like knives. Every 100 yards, Logan stopped to check Sarah's condition, her pulse, the progression of hypothermia that his interventions had slowed but not stopped. Her shivering had decreased, which terrified him more than if it had intensified. The body stopped shivering when core temperature dropped below 90 degrees. Energy conservation in final stages before shutdown. Stay with me. Logan spoke close to her ear during these stops, voice cutting through the storm. Tell me about your dogs. Tell me their names. Sarah's responses came slower each time, words thick and confused. Maverick, Denali, Scout, good boys, good girl. Her eyes struggled to focus. Cold. I know. 30 more minutes. You're strong. Stay strong 30 more minutes. Time became abstract, measured not in minutes, but in steps. In breath that burned lungs, in the methodical process of placing one boot in front of the other while carrying a dying woman and leading traumatized animals through conditions designed to kill. Logan's GPS showed progress that felt impossible. Each tenth of a mile earned through suffering that old have broken most people within the first half hour. 2 miles, 2.5. His legs trembled. His back spasmed. Sweat soaked the layers next to his skin, which meant he was now fighting his own hypothermia battle, moisture turning to ice against flesh. Scout went down at 3 miles, young legs simply giving out, collapsing into snow with a sound between whimper and resignation. Logan couldn't carry them both. The math was brutal and simple. He had maybe 90 minutes of functional capacity remaining at this exertion rate. The cabin was still 1.7 miles away. Every minute spent here was a minute closer to complete systemic failure for all of them. Denali made the decision. The elk-hound moved to Scout, pressed against the younger dog, and refused to abandon him. Pack loyalty overriding survival instinct. Maverick, despite his injured paw, limped back to join them, 3 dogs creating a huddle that would buy them perhaps an hour before the cold claimed all 3. Logan looked at Kodiak, his partner, his brother, the dog who'd saved his life and whose life he'd saved, whose loyalty was absolute and whose capability was unmatched. Stay, guard them. Kodiak's amber eyes met his with understanding that required no language. The dog positioned himself with the other 3, body providing warmth and protection, accepting the order even as it meant separating from Logan for the first time in 6 years of partnership. Logan forced himself to move. 1.7 miles, 90 minutes. Sarah's breathing was barely perceptible against his neck. He moved faster now, without the dogs, longer strides, accepting the increased energy burn because time had become the only currency that mattered. His legs found rhythm, born from ruck marches that had prepared him for selection. 20-mile movements under 100-pound loads, the suffering that built men into weapons. The blizzard threw everything against him. Wind hit 60 miles per hour. Visibility dropped to arm's length. Temperature bottomed at -30. His cabin appeared through the white like salvation or mirage, solid and real and impossible. 1 hour, 40 minutes after leaving Sarah's cabin, Logan kicked open his own door and carried her into warmth that felt like liquid fire against frozen skin. He laid her beside the fireplace, stripped her remaining damp clothing with clinical efficiency, wrapped her in his sleeping bag, and piled every blanket he owned on top. Built the fire to roaring inferno, boiled water, and prepared warm fluids she could barely swallow. Her core temperature was 87 degrees by his estimation, measured through symptoms rather than equipment he didn't possess. Severe hypothermia, confusion, drowsiness, weak pulse. She needed hospital care, IV fluids, controlled rewarming. She needed things he couldn't provide, so he provided what he could. Heat, monitoring, the presence of someone who refused to let her die because death wasn't acceptable, and Logan Reeves had never accepted the unacceptable. While Sarah's body fought its war against cold, Logan fought his own battle with exhaustion and tactical necessity. He stripped, changed into dry layers, forced himself to eat high-calorie rations his body needed to replace spent reserves, checked his weapons, inventoried ammunition, prepared the cabin for what his training and instinct told him was coming. Men who'd tried to murder a federal officer wouldn't stop because she'd survived. They'd escalate, they'd hunt, and they'd come here eventually. 2 hours after reaching the cabin, with Sarah's temperature slowly climbing toward 90 degrees and consciousness beginning to return in fragments, Logan suited back up for the storm. His body screamed. His muscles had moved beyond pain into the realm of damage he'd pay for later. It didn't matter. 4 animals were dying out there, and among them was the only being he'd allowed himself to love since losing his team in Syria. The return journey took 40 minutes. Logan following his GPS track with single-minded focus that ignored the storm, the cold, the way his vision tunneled, and his thoughts grew sluggish with his own developing hypothermia. He found them huddled exactly where he'd left them, Kodiak still maintaining guard position, the other 3 pressed against him in a pile of fur and desperation. All 4 were alive. Barely. Logan loaded Scout into a harness he'd brought, secured the young dog against his chest. Home. Let's go home. Kodiak rose stiffly, ice coating his vest, and took point. Maverick and Denali followed, movement mechanical and instinctive. The pack moved together through the storm, survival reduced to placing paws and boots forward, trusting in the alpha to lead them somewhere warm. They reached the cabin as Logan's reserves hit absolute zero, muscle failure imminent, cognition compromised by cold and exhaustion. He fell through the door with Scout still harnessed to his chest, 4 dogs collapsing around him, and for several minutes simply lay there while his body decided whether it had enough left to keep functioning. Sarah's voice reached him through the fog, stronger than before, urgent with concern that cut through his stupor. You went back for them. Logan forced himself to sitting position, began treating the dogs with the same methodical care he'd given Sarah. Told you, everyone comes home. He worked on autopilot, training overriding shutdown, dried and warmed each dog, treated Maverick's injured paw, cleaning wounds from what had indeed been a trap, crude but effective, designed to cripple. Applied antibiotic ointment, bandaged properly. Checked the others for frostbite, finding minor damage on ear tips and paw pads, but nothing catastrophic. Fed them, hydrated them, set them near the fire in their own nest of blankets. Only when all 4 dogs were stabilized did Logan finally allow himself to collapse into the single chair, body trembling with exhaustion that went beyond physical into existential. He'd carried a woman and rescued 4 dogs through a blizzard that should have killed all of them. He'd operated at capacity that exceeded training parameters. He'd made decisions that prioritized others over self-preservation. And somewhere in the process, he'd stopped being the broken seal hiding in the mountains and remembered what he'd been before trauma tried to erase it. A protector, a guardian, someone who stood between the innocent and those who would destroy them. Sarah watched him from her cocoon of blankets, eyes clear now, cognition restored. Who are you? Someone who was in the right place. Logan met her gaze. Now tell me everything about. Out Caldwell. Because when this storm breaks, he's coming. And I need to know what we're fighting. Sarah Chen's story emerged over the next 3 hours, while the blizzard raged outside, and 5 dogs slept in exhausted pile near the fire that Logan maintained with wood that would run out in approximately 36 hours if the storm continued at current intensity. She spoke in measured tones that became stronger as her core temperature normalized and the fog of hypothermia cleared from cognition that proved sharp and analytical once freed from the immediate threat of death. Logan listened with the focused attention of someone conducting tactical briefing, asking clarifying questions, building mental framework of the enemy and terrain, transforming her narrative into actionable intelligence. Richard Caldwell, she explained, was third-generation wealth built on extractive industries that had shaped Montana's economy for 70 years. His grandfather had founded Caldwell Mining in 1953, exploiting post-war demand for copper and other minerals. His father had expanded into timber, buying vast tracts when environmental regulations drove smaller operators into bankruptcy. Richard himself had diversified further, adding real estate development and political influence to the family portfolio. He contributed to gubernatorial campaigns, maintained relationships with both senators, employed 370 people directly, and influenced perhaps 2,000 more through contracting and secondary businesses. In Whitefish Ridge and surrounding communities, Caldwell Industries was the economy. The mine employed 60 workers at wages that supported families. The timber operation employed another 120. Town businesses survived on money that flowed from Caldwell paychecks. The school district relied on Caldwell's property tax contributions. The hospital wing bore his family name. When Richard Caldwell expressed opinion, elected officials listened. When he encountered obstacles, those obstacles tended to disappear through legal means when possible and extra-legal means when necessary. My husband worked for Caldwell Timber. Sarah's voice tightened with controlled emotion. Safety inspector. He started noticing discrepancies. Equipment that should have been replaced. Maintenance logs that were falsified. He reported it internally and was told to keep quiet. When he persisted, he died in what the investigation called equipment failure. You think it was murder? Logan didn't phrase it as question. I know it was murder. The equipment they claimed failed had been inspected 3 days prior by an independent contractor who found no issues. The failure happened to occur when my husband was alone, working late on a section of forest road, where accidents were conveniently fatal. She met Logan's eyes. My father died 6 months earlier. Different division, same company. Another unexplained accident. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. The poisoned wolves represented escalation from isolated murders to environmental catastrophe. Caldwell had discovered rare earth elements on federal land adjacent to his mining claims, minerals worth conservatively $400 million in current market. But the land was protected, home to one of Montana's few remaining wolf populations, designated critical habitat that made extraction legally impossible. Unless the wolves disappeared and the habitat designation was challenged. 14 wolves dead from compound 1080. Sarah's hands clenched. That's not random poisoning by some rancher protecting livestock. That's systematic elimination using restricted substances that require connections to acquire. I documented everything. Tissue samples, photographs, GPS coordinates. Then I followed the drainage patterns and found the real crime. Caldwell's exploratory mining had become active extraction, conducted illegally on federal land through claim jumping and falsified surveys that moved boundary markers. The operation had progressed far enough that runoff was already contaminating watershed. Heavy metals and processing chemicals in concentrations that would trigger mandatory EPA intervention. The evidence Sarah collected would shut down not just the illegal operation, but potentially Caldwell's entire regional presence. Decades of accumulated regulatory violations suddenly vulnerable to federal prosecution. I filed the report on January 14th. Sarah accepted the warm broth Logan handed her, sipped carefully. Routed it to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Federal Office, copied EPA and FBI. Put everything in cloud storage with instructions to release publicly if anything happened to me. Thought that would protect me. Insurance only works if the other side is rational. Logan checked the window, visibility still 0. Desperate people make desperate moves. What happened next? Marcus Voss arrived within 24 hours, threatening her directly. Sarah recognized him from her investigation. Former military police with dishonorable discharge. Now Caldwell's head of security and primary enforcer. 6 to 8 men under his command, all with backgrounds suggesting comfort with violence. The visit was warning, but when Sarah refused to recant her report, warning became action. The helicopter that triggered the avalanche, blocking her access road. The men who'd arrived at her cabin while she was trapped. Professional work, Marcus and 3 others. Faces she'd photographed through her window before they cut power and began systematically disabling her ability to survive or call for help. They'd sabotaged heating, destroyed communications equipment, chained the door from outside, and left her to freeze with clinical efficiency that suggested this wasn't their first execution. They talked while they worked. Sarah's voice dropped. Didn't think I could hear through the walls. Marcus told the others that by the time anyone found me, weeks from now, it would be obvious hypothermia, tragic accident, case closed. Said Caldwell wanted confirmation when the storm broke. Photographs of my body. Then they'd stage the scene to look like I'd run the heating system wrong, and carbon monoxide did it. Logan processed the timeline. Sarah had been left to die around 1300 hours on the 16th. Storm was predicted to continue through the 18th, possibly into the 19th. Caldwell's men would return when weather permitted, expecting to find a corpse. Instead, they'd find empty cabin, evidence of rescue, and tracks leading directly here if snow conditions allowed tracking. We have maybe 12 to 36 hours before the... Why come? Logan moved to his tactical pack, began inventory. Question is whether they come searching, or whether they assume you died exposure during escape attempt. They'll search. Sarah's certainty was absolute. Marcus is thorough. He'll verify death, and when he can't, he'll hunt. These men have killed before. They won't stop because it got complicated. A sound cut through wind outside, mechanical and distinctive. Vehicle engine, heavy duty, moving slowly. Logan's hand went to his rifle as Kodiak lifted his head, ears forward. The dogs sensed threat before humans did, instinct reading danger in sounds that didn't belong. Logan killed the cabin lights, moved to window position that allowed observation while minimizing exposure. Headlights penetrated the storm, indistinct but approaching. Large vehicle, possibly suburban or similar, equipped for winter travel with chains or tracks. It stopped approximately 60 yards from the cabin, engine idling. They're not supposed to be here yet. Sarah's voice carried realization and fear. Storm's not done. How are they even moving in this? Logan understood before she finished speaking. The same way special operations moved in impossible conditions. Training, equipment, motivation that overrode normal human limitation. Marcus Voss was former NP, which meant he had tactical background. And if he'd recruited his team from similar circles, these weren't ordinary thugs. They were professionals. The vehicle's passenger door opened. A figure emerged, bulky in cold weather gear, carrying what Logan's trained eye identified as AR platform rifle. The figure moved toward the cabin with caution that spoke of combat experience, weapon at ready position, using terrain for cover despite limited visibility. How many men does Marcus usually operate with? Logan's voice stayed calm, gathering intelligence. 6 to 8 total. He'd bring at least 3 for something like this. 4 hostiles minimum, trained and armed, approaching a cabin containing 1 SEAL with limited ammunition, an injured wildlife officer, and 5 exhausted dogs. The tactical math was poor, but not impossible. Logan had operated in worse ratios, and this time he had advantages. Home terrain, prepared position. Element of surprise regarding his presence and capability. The figure stopped 20 yards out, seemed to be studying the cabin, looking for signs of occupation. No lights, no smoke from chimney that Logan had deliberately damped. No tracks approaching, the storm having erased their arrival. To outside observation, the cabin appeared abandoned. Logan made his decision. He could engage now, eliminate the scout, but that would alert the others and invite siege situation he couldn't win. Better to appear vacant, let them pass, gain time. He signaled Sarah to absolute silence, hand on Kodiak's muzzle to prevent any sound. Minutes crawled past. The figure stood in the storm, weapon ready, clearly uncertain. Finally, he retreated to the vehicle. Doors closed. The Suburban turned, tracks departing back toward the main road. They were searching systematically, checking every structure. But they hadn't found their target yet. Sarah released breath she'd been holding. They'll be back, once they've cleared other possibilities. Then we used the time. Logan brought his pack to the table, began detailed inventory. Tell me about the evidence. What's on that hard drive? Everything. Financial records showing payments to Sheriff Hadley and 3 county commissioners. Video footage of the illegal mining operation. Soil and water tests showing contamination levels. Communications between Caldwell and Marcus discussing previous incidents, including my husband's death. Sarah's expression hardened with something beyond fear. It's enough to dismantle his entire operation and put him in federal prison for 20 years minimum. Then that's what we protect. Logan pulled out a satellite phone, military grade, his own private equipment maintained for emergencies. When this storm breaks enough for signal, we contact FBI directly, request immediate extraction and federal protection. Until then, we fortify and prepare for contact. A knock at the door froze them both. Soft, almost polite, completely unexpected. A woman's voice called through the wind, young and frightened. Please, if anyone's there, I need help. My car went off the road, unfreezing. Logan and Sarah exchanged glances. The tactical situation had just become infinitely more complicated. Logan moved to the door with rifle ready, every instinct screaming trap, even as training demanded he clear the threat before making assumptions. Kodiak positioned himself at Logan's left, body language communicating high alert, waiting for command. The other 3 dogs remained near Sarah, creating protective formation around the woman who'd earned their loyalty through years of partnership. The knock came again, more desperate now, accompanied by sobbing that sounded genuine but could be performance by someone skilled in manipulation. Please, I can't feel my hands. I just need to get warm. Sarah whispered urgently. It could be real. People do go off-road in these conditions. Or it's bait. Logan kept his voice low. Professional teams use distressed women because men hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. He made tactical decision, cracking the door 6 inches, rifle barrel visible, body positioned behind frame that would stop most handgun rounds. The woman outside was young, maybe 29, black woman with natural hair plastered to her head by snow and ice. She wore inadequate clothing for the conditions, civilian jacket, not rated for extreme cold, jeans that were frozen stiff, boots designed for fashion, not function. Her lips showed cyanosis, blue tint that indicated hypothermia. Hands were bare, fingers waxy white with frostbite. If this was performance, it was Academy Award worthy. Step back, slowly. Keep your hands visible. Logan scanned past her, looking for supporting hostiles, finding only storm and darkness. Anyone with you? No, just me, please. Her teeth chattered violently. Cars in a ditch half-mile back. Phone's dead. I've been walking for an hour. Logan made the call, knowing it could be wrong, accepting the risk because the alternative was letting someone die. Inside, fast. The woman stumbled through the door, collapsing immediately as legs gave out. Logan cleared behind her, weapon up, waiting for the breach team to follow their bait inside. Nothing. 10 seconds. 20. No attack. He secured the door, maintained weapon ready, while Sarah, operating on her own training and instinct, moved to help the woman. I'm Sarah. You're safe now. Let's get you warm. She guided the woman toward the fire, began the same treatment protocol Logan had used on her hours earlier. Remove wet clothing. Wrap in blankets. Apply heat gradually to avoid shock. The woman's story emerged between shivers and tears. Maya Okonkwo, 29 years old, journalist with Montana Independent Press. She'd been investigating Caldwell Industries for 8 months. Following leads about environmental violations, mysterious deaths, systematic corruption, she'd been trying to reach Sarah's cabin to interview her about the federal report when her vehicle lost traction and slid into drainage ditch. She'd walked, became disoriented in the storm, followed lights she'd seen in the distance that turned out to be Logan's cabin. You're the wildlife officer. Maya's eyes focused on Sarah with recognition that suggested she'd done her homework. You filed the EPA report. I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. Caldwell's men tried to kill me yesterday. Sarah's bluntness cut through any pretense. Left me to freeze. This man saved my life. Maya's attention shifted to Logan, journalist instinct cataloging details. You're military, special forces by the look of you. Retired. Logan didn't elaborate. What evidence do you have on Caldwell? 8 months of investigation, financial records showing money flowing to elected officials, testimonies from former employees about safety violations and intimidation. 3 deaths that were ruled accidental but show patterns suggesting murder. Maya's professional demeanor reasserted itself despite her physical condition. But it's all circumstantial. I need smoking gun, something that proves criminal enterprise beyond reasonable doubt. Sarah exchanged glances with Logan, decision passing between them without words. They needed allies. Maya needed evidence. The mathematics of survival sometimes required calculated risk. We have your smoking gun. Sarah retrieved her field journal, a hard drive, the documentation that represented months of meticulous investigation. Everything you need to destroy Caldwell's operation. But we have to survive long enough to get it to authorities who aren't corrupted. For the next hour, while Storm continued its assault and 5 dogs slept in exhausted pile, 3 people planned survival and counteroffensive against an enemy with superior numbers, resources, and home advantage. Maya provided critical intelligence about Caldwell's operation structure, personnel, and connections. Sarah contributed tactical knowledge of terrain and local infrastructure. Logan translated it all into operational planning, drawing on 12 years of experience conducting missions in hostile territory with limited support. The storm would break sometime in the next 12 to 24 hours. When it did, Caldwell's men would return to Sarah's cabin, discover her absence, and begin systematic search. They'd find tracks if snow conditions permitted, follow them here, and attempt to eliminate all witnesses. Local law enforcement was compromised. Cell service was unreliable. Federal authorities were 63 miles away across roads that wouldn't be passable for potentially days. We can't stay here. Logan's assessment was clinical. Defensible position, but isolated. They siege us, we starve in 3 days. We need to reach town, get to people, make this public enough that Caldwell can't kill us quietly. Town's 14 miles. Sarah's knowledge of terrain provided context. With injured dogs and Maya's frostbite, that's 8 to 10 hours movement in good conditions. Storm breaks, we're exposed during daylight with no cover. Then we move at night. Logan began checking gear, calculating loadouts. Storm breaks tomorrow, we rest during day, fortify position. If they come, we defend and break contact after dark. If they don't, we initiate movement at 2200 hours, use darkness for concealment. Maya interjected with information that changed calculations. There's someone in town who might help. Dr. Patterson runs the medical clinic. He's treated multiple suspicious injuries over the years. Thinks Caldwell's been covering up workplace murders. He's old school, won't be on the payroll. Can you reach him? Logan asked. Maybe, if cell service comes back even briefly. I have his direct number. Maya checked her phone, finding no signal, but batteries still viable. He's former Army, Vietnam. If we can contact him, explain the situation, he might be able to get message to federal authorities. It was thin, dependent on variables beyond their control, but thin was better than nothing. Logan approved the plan, began detailed preparation. He inventoried weapons, finding his own loadout, plus Sarah's service pistol and shotgun she'd had in her vehicle. Ammunition was finite but sufficient. 300 rounds of rifle, 200 of pistol, 30 shotgun shells. Against 4 to 8 hostiles. It provided margin for tactical engagement. Food was concerning. Logan's supplies were calculated for 1 person for 3 weeks. Now feeding 3 humans and 5 dogs, they had perhaps 4 days before serious rationing became necessary. Water was infinite from snowmelt. Firewood would last 3 more days at current consumption rate. The dogs represented both asset and liability. Kodiak was operational, combat-proven, worth 3 additional shooters in tactical situation. Maverick, despite injured paw, was trained tracker and attack dog. Denali and Scout were less tactically useful, but their presence meant Sarah and Maya had emotional support and additional early warning systems. They'd all move together or die together. Around 1800 hours, Kodiak's ears swiveled toward the approach road. Low growl emerged from his chest. Warning that bypassed conscious thought and communicated directly with Logan's autonomic nervous system. The dogs scattered from their sleeping pile, taking defensive positions, instinct overriding exhaustion. Logan killed lights immediately, moved to observation position. Headlights again, multiple vehicles this time, approaching slowly. 2 Suburbans, heavy-duty, moving in convoy formation. They stopped 80 yards out, engines idling, high beams penetrating storm that was beginning to lessen in intensity. Weather was breaking ahead of predictions. Doors opened. 6 men emerged, all armed with rifles, moving with tactical coordination that confirmed Logan's assessment. These weren't amateurs. Marcus Voss led them, identifiable by his command presence and the way others deferred to his positioning. They spread in loose formation, weapons ready, advancing on the cabin with caution born from professional understanding that unknown situations killed careless operators. They found us. Maya's voice carried fear but also resignation. What do we do? Logan's mind calculated angles, distances, ammunition expenditure, probable enemy capabilities. 6 hostiles, well-armed, trained, motivated. Defending the cabin meant static position against force that could suppress and maneuver. Breaking contact meant movement through storm, with 3 women and 5 dogs, leading evidence behind, risking exposure and pursuit. He made the decision that training and experience dictated was tactically sound, even though every instinct screamed to stand and fight. We run, now, out the back, take only what you can carry. Logan began grabbing essential gear, stuffing Sarah's evidence into waterproof bag, securing weapons. Kodiak, Scout, Maverick, Denali, with me, Sarah, Maya, stay between me and the dogs. We move fast and quiet. Where are we going? Sarah was already moving, trusting Logan's judgment, because he'd earned that trust by carrying her through a blizzard. Anywhere but here. Logan pulled on his pack, handed Sarah her shotgun, gave Maya a flare gun from his emergency kit. When they breach and find us gone, they'll pursue. We use darkness, storm, and terrain. Make them work for it. Marcus Voss's voice carried through the wind, amplified by tactical bullhorn. We know you're in there. Come out now. This doesn't have to get ugly. Logan led his convoy through the back door into the storm, and behind them, the cabin that had represented sanctuary became battlefield they'd willingly abandoned to survive another hour. They moved through darkness and diminishing storm like ghosts. 8 beings bound by survival instinct and a fragile hope that morning would find them alive and free, rather than frozen corpses scattered across Montana wilderness. Logan led with Kodiak at point. The dog's superior senses detecting obstacles and threats before human eyes registered danger. Sarah followed immediately behind Logan, then Maya, with Maverick, Denali, and Scout forming rear guard that instinct told them was tactically necessary even without human command. The dogs understood pack dynamics, understood they were fleeing predators, understood that survival meant moving silent and fast, despite exhaustion that made every step negotiation with collapsing physiology. Behind them, the cabin erupted in sound. Breaching charges detonated, door exploding inward, flashbangs creating disorientation that would have incapacitated anyone inside. Marcus Voss and his team entered with speed and violence, clearing rooms with professional efficiency, discovering within 30 seconds that their prey had escaped. Shouting followed, angry commands, then the systematic destruction of everything Logan had left behind. They were sending message. They were erasing evidence of sanctuary. They were promising that nowhere was safe. Logan pushed his group northeast, away from town, away from predicted pursuit routes, into terrain that was brutal but provided advantages to those willing to suffer. The storm had lessened from catastrophic to merely severe, visibility improving to maybe 50 yards, wind dropping to 30 miles per hour. Temperature held at -20, cold enough to kill, but survivable with proper gear and movement. The dogs struggled, particularly Scout, whose youth hadn't prepared him for this level of sustained exertion. But fear and pack loyalty drove him forward on legs that trembled with each step. They'd covered maybe a mile when Kodiak stopped, body rigid, head turned toward their back trail. Logan dropped to knee beside his partner, hand on the dog's shoulder, reading the message in tense muscles and focused attention. Pursuit, close, moving fast. They're tracking us. Logan kept his voice at whisper that barely carried over wind, probably using thermal optics. Our heat signatures are visible even in this storm. Sarah's face showed understanding and despair. We can't outrun them. Not with the dogs, not with Maya's frostbite, not in these conditions. We don't outrun them. Logan's tactical mind had already calculated options, finding one that was terrible but viable. We lead them where we want them, then we make them regret following. 200 yards ahead, terrain dropped into a ravine. Steep-sided and filled with snow that had drifted to 12 feet deep. Natural funnel that would canalize movement, limit visibility, provide ambush opportunity for defender with elevation advantage. Logan guided his group to the ravine's edge, positioned Sarah and Maya behind rock outcropping that would provide cover and concealment. Stay here, keep the dogs quiet. If shooting starts, stay down. Logan checked Sarah's shotgun, ensured she understood basic operation. You only fire if they get past me. Understood? What are you going to do? Maya asked, though her journalist instincts probably already knew the answer. Give them a reason to reconsider their career choices. Logan moved 30 yards upslope, positioning himself where terrain provided overlapping fields of fire into the ravine. Kodiak positioned beside him, understanding without command that they were preparing ambush. If this goes wrong, you run. Follow the ravine northeast for 3 miles. You'll hit Forest Service Road 47. Flag down anyone you see, get to federal authorities, deliver that evidence. He didn't wait for response, attention fully committed to the approach. Marcus Voss appeared first, moving with tactical competence that confirmed military background, weapon up, using terrain intelligently. 5 men followed in staggered column, spacing that prevented single engagement from eliminating multiple targets. They were hunting, but cautious, aware their quarry included someone with capabilities that had already extracted Sarah from certain death and evaded initial pursuit. Logan waited, controlled breathing, heart rate dropping into that calm space where time stretched and clarity emerged from chaos. Let them commit. Let them enter the fatal funnel where terrain limited their options and elevation gave defender every advantage. Marcus reached the ravine's entrance, paused, recognizing the tactical problem. He sent 2 men to flank right, 2 to flank left, keeping 2 with him in center. Sound tactical decision that would have worked against most opponents. But Logan wasn't most opponents, and Kodiak was most dogs. Logan's first shot took the leftmost flanker, center mass, the man dropping instantly. Suppressed. Rifle made sound like sharp cough, barely audible over wind. Second shot dropped the rightmost flanker before Marcus's team could even identify direction of fire. Kodiak launched on Logan's German command, 95 pounds of trained aggression covering 30 yards in seconds, hitting one of the centermen with force that drove him into snowbank with broken ribs and dislocated shoulder. Marcus and his remaining 2 men returned fire, muzzle flashes revealing positions. Rounds impacting rock and snow around Logan's position but failing to find flesh. Logan moved, combat roll to secondary position, fired twice more, dropping another hostile who'd exposed himself trying to suppress Logan's original location. 4 down in 20 seconds. Tactical situation reversed from hunter-prey to survival desperation. Fall back. Marcus's command carried authority, born from knowing when tactical situation had become untenable. Fall back to vehicles. They retreated with discipline, covering each other, retrieving their wounded, professional to the end even in defeat. Logan let them go, not from mercy but from tactical calculation. He'd demonstrated capability, inflicted casualties, bought time and psychological advantage. Pursuing into unknown terrain against desperate men would risk everything gained. Kodiak returned to Logan's side, uninjured, the man he'd engaged unconscious but alive. Logan zip-tied the hostile's hands, took his weapons and radio, retrieved intelligence that might prove valuable. The man was breathing, would survive if his team retrieved him within the hour. Logan wasn't executioner, just warrior protecting innocence. Sarah and Maya emerged from cover, faces showing shock and awe at violence that had lasted mere seconds but fundamentally altered tactical landscape. Maya's journalist brain was processing, probably already writing the story. But Sarah's law enforcement experience recognized professional combat skill that exceeded anything civilian world typically encountered. You just fought off 6 armed men in under a minute. Sarah's voice carried respect and something else. Recognition that Logan Reeves was weapon that violence had forged and circumstance had aimed at evil deserving destruction. 4 men. 2 are down but alive. 2 retreated uninjured. Marcus and 1 other are assessing whether I'm worth dying to stop. Logan checked his ammunition, having expended 8 rounds. 300 minus 8 left plenty for what was coming. We bought maybe 2 hours before they regroup or call reinforcements. We use it to reach town. They moved again, northeast bearing, pace brutal but necessary. The dogs followed, courage and loyalty overcoming exhaustion. Maya's frostbitten hands screamed pain, but she pushed through. Journalists' determination to survive and tell the story providing motivation that transcended physical suffering. Sarah carried her shotgun with new understanding that violence wasn't aberration, but sometimes necessary tool when facing evil that recognized no other language. 2 hours of movement brought them to Forest Service Road 47, as Logan had promised. Unpaved track that served summer recreation but was theoretically maintained for winter emergency access. Theoretically. Reality showed 2 feet of packed snow, no recent traffic, but passable for vehicle with chains and determination. Dawn was approaching, sky lightening to gray, that promised clear weather and elimination of storm's concealment. Maya's phone chirped, miraculous sound in wilderness. Single bar of signal, intermittent but present. She dialed with trembling fingers, reached Dr. Patterson's number, got voicemail, left message that communicated everything in 30 seconds. Location, situation, need for federal intervention, evidence that would destroy Caldwell. Then signal died. Conversation terminated, but seed was planted. Sound of engine cut through dawn silence. Vehicle approaching from town. Civilian truck with snowplow blade. Driven by elderly man with silver beard and eyes that assess them with medical precision before civilian concern. Dr. Patterson. Sarah's voice carried relief and disbelief. How did you find us? Got a call from Maya's editor 20 minutes ago. Said she'd missed check-ins. Knew she was investigating Caldwell. Asked me to look for her. The doctor's eyes tracked to Logan. Recognition passing between 2 men who'd served in different wars but understood the same truths. You look like you've had a rough night. Get in, all of you. Dogs too. They loaded into the truck bed, dogs included, covered with tarps the doctor provided. As Patterson turned toward town, he spoke over his shoulder with casual tone that belied serious content. You should know. FBI field office in Kalispell got anonymous tip about federal officer in danger. They're sending team, should be in Whitefish Ridge within 2 hours. Also should know that Caldwell's lawyers are already spinning story about environmental terrorists attacking his operations. He's got Sheriff Hadley claiming you're wanted for assault, Sarah. We have evidence that proves everything. Maya held up the waterproof bag containing Sarah's documentation. Financial crimes, environmental violations, murder conspiracy, everything needed to dismantle his operation. Then I suggest we keep you alive until FBI arrives. Patterson's voice hardened, because Caldwell's going to make one last play. Desperate men do desperate things, and Richard Caldwell's never been more desperate than right now. The truck rolled into Whitefish Ridge as dawn broke fully, revealing the town and the final confrontation that would determine whether justice prevailed or power crushed those who dared challenge its authority. Dr. Patterson. Patterson's medical clinic occupied a 2-story building on Main Street that had served Whitefish Ridge for 35 years, treating everything from childhood infections to mining accidents to the quiet injuries that people brought when they feared official hospitals would ask questions they couldn't answer. The structure was solid brick, built in an era when construction meant permanence. With reinforced doors and windows that suggested the doctor understood that medicine sometimes required defendable position. Patterson led them through the back entrance, past examination rooms that smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, into a basement that revealed the man's true nature. The space was organized like field hospital, supplies that went beyond civilian medical practice into tactical trauma care, combat tourniquets, hemostatic agents, surgical equipment that could handle gunshot wounds without need. For hospital infrastructure, Patterson caught Logan's expression, offered thin smile that contained decades of history. Vietnam taught me that sometimes people need help outside official channels. Been running this secondary clinic for 40 years. Treated folks who couldn't go to authorities. No questions asked, no records kept. The doctor secured the heavy door, engaged locks that were serious enough to slow determined entry. FBI's en route, ETA 90 minutes. We hole up here, wait for cavalry. Logan conducted tactical assessment of the space, finding it more defensible than ideal, but workable. Single entrance through secured door. Windows at ground level that could be monitored. Thick walls that would stop most small arms fire. Supplies and communications equipment that provided sustainability. The dogs settled into corners, exhaustion finally permitted to manifest now that immediate flight wasn't necessary. Sarah and Maya collapsed into chairs while Patterson examined them with clinical efficiency, treating Maya's frostbite with warm water immersion and pain medication, checking Sarah's recovery from hypothermia, pronouncing both lucky to be alive. He turned attention to Logan, noting the combat efficiency with which the younger man moved, the way his eyes never stopped calculating angles and threats. You were SEAL. Patterson's statement required no confirmation. Can see it in how you carry yourself. How old are you, son? 34? 35? I was Army medic. Did 2 tours treating boys your age who came back in pieces or didn't come back at all. What brought you to Montana? Looking for quiet. Logan checked his rifle, maintaining weapon even in sanctuary. Found a fight instead. Always happens to men like us. Patterson handed Logan coffee. Gesture of respect between warriors, separated by generations, but united by understanding. Question now is whether quiet's what you still want, or whether you found something worth staying for. The question hung unanswered as Kodiak's low growl interrupted, warning that preceded the sound of vehicles outside. Multiple engines, heavy duty, moving with purpose. Logan moved to window, observed 4 Suburbans parking in formation that blocked street access. Men emerged, 12 total, armed with rifles held openly despite broad daylight and civilian setting. Marcus Voss led them, face set with determination of someone who understood this was final gambit. Win now or face consequences that would destroy everything. Sheriff Tom Hadley's patrol car arrived moments later, the 61-year-old elected official emerging with hand on sidearm, costume of authority concealing corruption that ran marrow deep. He approached the clinic's front entrance with Marcus beside him, theater of legitimacy providing cover for what was essentially armed assault. Hadley's voice carried through the door, amplified by bullhorn, projecting authority that 20 years of elected office had taught him to weaponize. This is Sheriff Hadley. We have warrant for arrest of Sarah Chen on charges of assaulting Caldwell Industries security personnel. We know she's inside. Send her out and nobody else needs trouble. Patterson moved to intercom, pressed transmit, voice steady and contemptuous. Tom, you corrupt son of a bitch. There's no warrant. There's just Caldwell's money and your willingness to murder a federal officer to keep collecting it. FBI's en route. You want to be standing there with 12 armed men when they arrive? Silence followed, calculation happening behind Marcus's eyes. He spoke to Hadley, too quiet for microphones to catch, then turned and issued orders. His men spread out, surrounding the building, establishing perimeter that demonstrated military training and intention to prosecute assault, regardless of consequences. Last chance. Marcus had taken the bullhorn, addressing the clinic directly. We're coming in. Send out Chen, the evidence, and the SEAL who killed 4 of my men. You've got 60 seconds. Maya checked her phone, finding 2 bars of signal now that dawn had broken and atmospheric conditions improved. I can live stream this. Get it out before they can spin their version. Do it. Logan approved immediately. Make this public. Make it so killing us means the whole world watches. Maya's fingers flew over her phone, activating social media, beginning broadcast that would transmit everything. She narrated with journalist's efficiency, identifying location, explaining Caldwell's crimes, showing Sarah's evidence on screen, naming names and documenting conspiracy while Logan and Patterson prepared for assault they both knew was coming. The first window shattered as breaching charge detonated, intended to create entry point and shock defenders into paralysis. Logan had positioned himself at angle that gave him clear field of fire, dropped the first man through the window with single shot that demonstrated precision born from years of training. Kodiak launched at the second man, taking him down before he could acquire target. The other 3 dogs, following Kodiak's lead and protecting their pack, added to chaos with barking that was psychologically devastating in enclosed space. Marcus's team breached the front door simultaneously, explosive charge destroying locks, 4 men entering with tactical coordination. Patterson, 70 years old but steady from decades of practice, fired his own rifle, weapon he'd maintained since Vietnam, dropping the lead man with shot placement that spoke of muscle memory that transcended time. Logan acquired second target, fired, shifted, acquired third target, methodical and devastating. The assault collapsed within 15 seconds, Marcus recognizing that fortified position defended by competent shooters was killing ground, not achievable objective. His men retreated, dragging wounded, leaving 2 dead. Tactical situation transformed from overwhelming force to desperate siege. Sheriff Hadley's voice cracked with panic now. Pretense of authority shattered. "Marcus, we need to leave. This is over. FBI's coming. It's over when I say it's over." Marcus's response carried fanaticism of man who understood it, that survival meant total victory, that leaving witnesses meant prison or death. Burn it. Burn the building. Destroy the evidence and everyone inside. The smell of gasoline penetrated before flames became visible. Accelerant splashed against the building's exterior. Multiple points, systematic preparation for inferno. Marcus intended total destruction, murder-suicide of entire situation. Gambling that physical evidence destroyed and witnesses dead would allow Caldwell's lawyers to construct plausible narratives that would preserve the empire even if Marcus himself didn't survive consequences. Logan moved to Maya, ensuring her phone was still transmitting, that live broadcast was capturing everything. "Keep filming. Whatever happens, the world sees this." Smoke began infiltrating, flames visible through windows, heat building rapidly. The dogs whined, primal fear of fire overriding training. Sarah moved to them, providing comfort, refusing to show panic even as situation deteriorated toward fatal conclusion. Then sound of helicopter penetrated. Heavy rotor blades, military aviation distinct from civilian craft. Logan recognized it immediately. UH-60 Black Hawk. Federal response team incoming with speed that suggested this wasn't routine. The helicopter circled the building, downdraft scattering flames, loudspeaker blaring with authority that Marcus Voss had no counter for. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, cease all hostile action. Drop weapons. Anyone who fires will be engaged with lethal force." Marcus's men broke first, dropping rifles, hands raised, self-preservation overriding loyalty to employer who'd led them into federal crime with consequences they weren't prepared to face. Marcus himself stood frozen, weapon half raised, calculating odds that didn't exist, until Kodiak's growl behind him communicated what statistics couldn't. He was surrounded, outmatched, dizzy-eyed. Sheriff Hadley attempted to flee, made it to his patrol car before FBI agents tackled him into snow, handcuffs applied with efficiency that spoke to practice. The helicopter landed in the street, agents emerging in tactical gear, establishing control with overwhelming presence. Fire department arrived simultaneously, containing flames before structure sustained critical damage. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, 42 years old, with 20 years' experience in organized crime investigation, approached the clinic with authority born from federal mandate that superseded local corruption. Logan emerged first, weapons safed, hands visible, Kodiak at his side. Sarah followed, carrying the waterproof bag containing evidence, Maya behind her still filming, documenting everything for record and public consumption that would make cover-up impossible. Martinez assessed Logan with experienced eye, recognizing military bearing and capability that had shaped events. "You're Reeves, Navy SEAL. We got your service record when Patterson's call came through. Hell of a thing you did here. Just standing up when someone couldn't." Logan's voice carried exhaustion that went beyond physical into existential. "Evidence is intact. Officer Chen can walk you through everything." The next hours were bureaucratic epilogue to violence. Statements and evidence transfer and medical examination. FBI arrested Marcus Voss, his surviving men, Sheriff Hadley, and by noon had Richard Caldwell in federal custody, extracted from his mansion by agents armed with warrant that Sarah's evidence had justified. The empire that 3 generations had built collapsed in single morning. Corruption exposed to sunlight that disinfected through public scrutiny and federal prosecution. 3 months later, Logan Reeves stood on the porch of cabin he'd rebuilt, replacing damage from fire that had never quite reached fatal conclusion. Whitefish Ridge spread below, town that had learned that corruption could be challenged, that power wasn't absolute, that sometimes all it took was one person willing to stand. Sarah Chen visited weekly, her position with Fish and Wildlife now elevated to regional coordinator, overseeing restoration of habitat that Caldwell's operation had damaged. Her 3 dogs had recovered fully. Maverick's paw healed, all 3 bonded with Kodiak in pack relationship that transcended professional partnership into genuine family. Maya Okonkwo's reporting had won journalism awards, exposing systemic corruption across 3 counties, triggering federal investigations that would continue for years. She'd moved to Whitefish Ridge permanently, buying small house on Main Street, continuing work but now from place she'd helped save. Dr. Patterson had retired officially, though his basement clinic remained operational for those who needed help outside channels. He and Logan shared coffee most mornings, 2 warriors from different generations finding common ground in shared understanding. Logan received letter from FBI, formal recognition of his actions, alongside inquiry about potential consulting work. Training opportunities, ways his skills could serve justice without requiring return to active military service. He hadn't answered yet, wasn't sure what he wanted beyond the peace he'd finally found, not through isolation, but through connection. Kodiak sat beside him, amber eyes watching horizon. Partner and brother, whose instincts had pulled Logan from isolation into purpose he hadn't known he needed. The dog leaned against Logan's leg, weight and warmth communicating everything that words couldn't. Maybe carrying peace to those who need it was the answer all along. Logan spoke to Kodiak, to the mountains, to himself. Maybe being a warrior isn't about the fight. It's about standing up when others can't. His phone buzzed, message from Sarah. Possible situation developing. Family being threatened by land developer. Could use someone with your particular skills. Interested? Logan looked at Kodiak. The dog's ears perked, tail wagged once, answer clear. Looks like we're needed again, brother. Because somewhere out there, someone was waiting for a hero. And when duty called, when the innocent needed protection and evil needed confronting, Logan Reeves and Kodiak would answer. Not because they sought violence or glory, but because some people were born to stand between darkness and light, and walking away was never really an option. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand, one person who refuses to look away when injustice demands attention. One person who understands that peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the courage to face it when necessary. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Logan's position? Would you have walked into that storm to save a stranger? May you find the courage to stand when others can't, and may you always have a loyal companion at your side when duty calls. Until the next story, stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember that heroes aren't born in comfort, but forged in the moments when they choose to act despite every reason to walk away.